COVID-19 continues to spread across the globe, reaching more than a dozen countries. Belarus, Lithuania, New Zealand, and Nigeria have all reported their first cases.
The COVID-19 virus has spread beyond more borders. At least 8 more countries, including Denmark, Estonia, Georgia, Greece, Romania, Norway, North Macedonia, and Brazil, have confirmed their first infections.
Coronavirus officially hitting the U.S. Here's what we know. A Washington state resident fell ill after returning from Wuhan, China.
The DOH is confirming that the 38-year-old female Chinese patient under investigation, or PUI, is positive for the novel coronavirus.
In December 2019, Chinese authorities notified the world that the virus was spreading through their communities. On the following months, it spread through the other countries, with cases doubling within days. This virus is the severe acute respiratory syndrome-related coronavirus 2 that causes the disease called COVID-19, and everyone simply called it coronavirus. The COVID-19 made an alarming impact among different countries, and you cannot deny the fact that it has grown worse for other countries, while others were winning on it. Because of this, different strategies were implemented by different countries which helped resolve the active cases in their own way. But how are these countries making an action? Today, we will be discussing on different countries and how are they managing the COVID-19 situation.
Starting with China, the origin of the virus, they had to implement strict measures, especially when the outbreak has occurred. By late February, authorities went door to door in Wuhan for health checks and forcibly isolating every resident, even separating parents from their young kids who displayed symptoms of the virus no matter how mild. Temperatures are monitored for all residents and only limited personnel are allowed to come in, solely for the delivery of food and medicine, since Wuhan had to be in total lockdown. There were also drones hovering above streets to yell at people to get inside and scold them for not wearing masks. The country had a mandatory phone app that color-coded people for their contagion risk to determine who could and could not enter malls, subways, and other public places. A couple of videos resurfaced online. Chinese authorities welding doors shut to an entire apartment building in Wuhan with the residents locked inside. Citizens who violated prevention measures tied to a pole or being publicly humiliated.
For Australia, last February 27, the Prime Minister of Australia activated their Australian Health Sector Emergency Response Plan for novel coronavirus, or COVID-19. That states the rapid spread of the virus outside of China had prompted their government to elevate its response. The ongoing upgrades and health campuses were postponed due to the accommodations for patients infected with the virus. Just like the other countries, social distancing measures were implemented starting March, including banning of public gatherings of at least more than 2 people and shutting down non-essential businesses. In terms of traveling, any overseas flights were either banned or already cancelled, and any arrivals in Australia for the succeeding days are needed to be quarantined for 14 days. While for the communities, wage subsidies were provided to support households, businesses, and investment incentives for regions and industries that were most affected by the pandemic crisis. In addition, Parliament approved an advance authorization of $40 million for any unforeseen events. Also, the exchange rate has been allowed to adjust flexibly to absorb economic shocks. And as of July 3, there were more than 2.5 million COVID-19 tests that have been conducted across Australia. And because of this complicated situation, over 6.3 million Australians have downloaded their so-called COVID Save app that could somehow speed up contacting people who've been or were possibly exposed to the virus. And with all of these circumstances, Australia still managed to lessen its cases as early as possible, with only 485 active cases out of the total 8,255 cases. Australia's battle with COVID-19 could be in success with guaranteed self-discipline and cooperation from their countrymen, where all expectations and goals fall in one line. The policies and plans for the government for the sake of the country will be leading to one goal, and is to be a COVID-19 free. With the help of their technology and funds to sustain the needs of their fellow men. By that, one of these days, as much as possible, everything will be a success.
For the country of South Korea, as of July 2, only 938 active cases were left out of the total 12,979 cases. Making sure that those numbers would go down as the day passes, policies were adjusted. People are informed of the medical system and what process they need to undergo and follow once there is a suspected infection. To minimize people-to-people interactions, symptoms are assessed and initial assessment is provided by phone, and if suspected of infection, the patient will be brought to a COVID-19 testing site. Once positive is immediately brought to a quarantined environment to receive medical care. By the practice transparency, people who had a direct contact with a positive tested citizen are to be immediately tested, and indirect contacts are to undergo self-quarantine at their home for 14 days. Instead of a full-scale lockdown, it relied on mass testing, tracking technology, and contact tracing. While the country has largely relied on urging people to socially distance, it also introduced measures like closing schools and urging companies to give employees flexible time off. Without having to choke off their economy, South Korea started a new daily life with COVID-19. They moved gradually and safely closer to resemble everyday life before the pandemic, but while keeping a vigilant eye out for any sign of backsliding.
For the Indonesian people, Indonesia still is far from its goal, especially with 30,091 cases as of July 9. For their strategy, containment measures were implemented such as temporary travel bans on air and sea transportations. The government also banned Indonesia's traditional annual exodus for Muslim holidays in an effort to curb the spread of the virus from Jakarta and other high-risk regions. Indonesia has recently begun easing some containment measures under a new normal. The city of Jakarta has started a transitional phase from large-scale social restrictions on June 5, and further eased restrictions on malls on June 15, and parks and recreation areas on June 20.
Sweden, on the other hand, has a total of 56,025 cases as of July 2, and with only 16 recovered cases. Sweden was the only European country that did not follow the policies implemented in Europe. Hence, they took a different approach which took them in a different route. In fact, no mandatory lockdown has been enforced in Sweden. People were able to move freely within their country as well as across the Swedish border, which may be difficult as their neighboring countries will most likely prohibit them from entering. Currently, the Public Health Agency of Sweden does not consider it necessary to close all schools in their country because they believe that there is no known scientific evidence indicating that such an intervention would have any significant impact or effect on this pandemic crisis. Despite their belief regarding their schooling, they've decided on banning all public gatherings and events with more than 50 people. So as we can notice, Sweden's way of dealing with this pandemic situation is somehow different among other countries, despite the cases they have. Hopefully, they could cope for a better point of view towards this crisis, not only to prevent more cases, but also to make sure of precautionary measures around their respective communities. Lastly, may their government and fellow men realize what could lead them and lessen themselves from going out from time to time.
Lastly, for the United States of America, having a total of 2.68 million cases became a rough patch for them, especially with only 825,781 recovered cases were reported. Nonetheless, the policies they have implemented were the same with other countries, such as limiting the number of gatherings, avoiding social gatherings, and closing of bars and restaurants once an active case became present in that region. With different states implementing their own strategies, especially the state of Florida, they closed their several beaches to tamp down large gatherings of people, especially on the anticipated spring break. However, thousands of citizens don't seem to abide the social distancing rule, as they force themselves to still visit beaches. The White House was clear of their released guidelines. However, people from different states gathered without masks to demonstrate their civil rights, opposing the imposed lockdown and social distancing measures.
Countries must learn from each other so that the world can develop the widest possible range of measures to fight this virus in different contexts. All of us are deeply affected by the pandemic, as many lives were lost and the economy also went down. As one in battling the COVID-19 pandemic, we can hopefully overcome this sooner and everything can be back to normal again.